All right, let's try this again. What you don't know is that prior to right now, I already recorded a half an hour of the almost internet famous weekly TechSpective happy hour and had the wrong microphone activated, so there was zero audio, and now I'm starting over. And so that's fun. You know, rookie mistake, live and learn. Here we are. So week 2 of the almost internet famous weekly TechSpective happy hour. This week I'm going to feature, it seems like it's bright, like I can't really see it, but this is a Southern Pecan Nut Brown Ale from Lazy Magnolia Brewery. So we're going to try that out, see what that's about. Cheers. It's good. If you go back and watch last week, you'll see that I already went on and on about how I'll drink a Budweiser or a Miller Lite, but they're not really my preference. I like an occasional Corona, but I prefer a darker beer with a bolder flavor. It's also how I like my coffee. I prefer dark roasts. I prefer bold flavors. It's just my preference. So this is good. I like porters and just darker beers. So again, this is it's from Lazy Magnolia. It says it's Mississippi's brewery, and Lazy Magnolia Brewing Company, Southern Pecan, the original pecan nut brown ale. So, all right, let's talk tech. Actually, first let's talk Halloween. Today is Friday, October 30th, which means tomorrow is October 31st, which is Halloween. Earlier today, I posted something about Halloween, about kind of getting ready for Halloween and how we do Halloween around here. We normally decorate earlier. This year, there were some various factors conspiring, partially weather, partially just how busy our calendar has been. So the kids and I just finally got the cobwebs stretched out across the bushes and on the door earlier today. We have our glowing red-eyed ghastly ghoul out front on the porch, attached to a fog machine, so he spews fog, and the whole thing makes between the fog and the strobe light and everything makes for a spooky entrance for all the would-be candy getters, and that's just how we roll. And every year I say I'm going to do it bigger and better. I have all kinds of grandiose aspirations for doing the whole yard and doing this big elaborate thing. It would look like something out of Disney World, but every year Halloween sneaks up on me and I have neither the time nor the money to do what I actually wanted to do. So anyway, instead we've done what we've always done, which is our fog machine ghoul and some cobwebs on the front bushes. But I had some information was given to me, an infographic, a couple of infographics about Halloween, and I thought it was interesting that costumes are actually the thing people spend the most money on. I would have guessed decorations because it's expensive. I guess we spend a fair amount of money every year on costumes as well, but to really do decorations, I guess my thinking is biased because to do Halloween the way I want to do Halloween would be really freaking expensive. So So in my mind, decorations are the big financial hold up there. But no, costumes was number one. Candy was number two. So apparently there's a lot of people buying the full-size Snickers bars, and I need to go trick-or-treating in that neighborhood. And then number three was decorations. There's actually a fourth, which was Halloween cards, which I didn't even know Halloween cards are a thing, but apparently 5% of the money spent on Halloween goes to Halloween cards. Go figure. So that was interesting. The other infographic is about horror movies, and it was the top 15 Halloween movies based on U.S. box office sales. So number one by far was The Exorcist. But number two is Blair Witch Project. And what's interesting about that, if you haven't seen it, you should see Blair Witch Project, although I think it might lose a little something watching it at home on your television than it did at the time, because there was a whole, part of the ambiance was the whole marketing campaign around Blair Witch Project that made it, they had like planted fake press releases, and the whole thing gave it this air of reality. And it's filmed in sort of a first person mode with just a handheld camcorder on like zero budget. So it looks like basically something I could make in my backyard, but it's very well done, and it was an excellent movie when I saw it the first time. And so I do recommend that you see it if you haven't seen it. And like I say, what's interesting about that is it was number 2 on this list of the top 15 highest grossing horror movies, behind The Exorcist. And it costs almost nothing to make. So that's fairly impressive. But the other thing that stood out to me is the fact that none of the, what I would consider classic horror movies are even in this top 15 list. There's no Halloween. There's no Nightmare on Elm Street. There's no Friday the 13th. And, that's taking into account the fact that there's, Halloween 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and there's Friday the 13th 1 through 29, and Friday the 13th, Jason versus Freddy Krueger on Mars. I mean, they've beat those franchises to death. And even with all of those movies and all of that, all of those opportunities in the box office, none of those made the top 15. There were things like the Saw, Scream, those kind of movies. So I have a feeling that it was just based on actual pure gross numbers and not on adjusted for inflation. So I would be curious to see what that list would look like if you adjusted it for inflation, and whether or not some of those classics, Halloween and Friday the 13th, would make the list of the top 15 or top 20, whatever, horror movies, if you took into account adjusting for inflation. So that's the Halloween part. Next, I want to talk about package delivery. Also, not very techy per se, but with the holidays coming around and everyone's going to be, buying gadgets for gifts for loved ones or for themselves, and I know we'll be buying a ton of stuff on Amazon Prime. And so package delivery becomes, very important. I mean, you buy this stuff, especially when you buy it at Amazon Prime, you expect it to show up in a couple of days. And, so I had posted a survey on TechSpective last week to gauge, package delivery and people's experience with package delivery, and, what's your go-to, like if you're going to ship a package, who's your first choice? And have you had a package late or damaged? And have you had a package that was lost? And if so, who was responsible? So I'll post, I'll write a post on TechSpective this week about it, summing up the results. But basically, USPS, the U.S. Postal Service, and UPS are tied as people's first choice, the go-to for who they use to ship packages. But when it comes to late or damaged packages, most of the respondents said that they have had a late or damaged package, and the U.S. Postal Service was responsible most of the time. Most of the people have also had a lost package, and the U.S. Postal Service was responsible most of the time. What's interesting about that, and the reason that I did the survey in the first place, is that we have horrible, like unfathomably bad U.S. Postal Service here. And so this is not an indictment of the U.S. Postal Service at large. I understand that there is a tremendous volume of mail and packages that is sent from point A to point B, and that every day they get 99.9% of it right. But that 0.1% they get wrong seems to all happen in this neighborhood. And I say that as someone who, I was born in Michigan. I lived in 2 different places in the Los Angeles area. I lived in Minneapolis. I lived in Chicago. I lived back in Michigan in 4 different places around the Detroit area. I lived in the San Antonio area, Denver, New Mexico. I've now lived in 2 places in Texas. I was overseas in the Air Force for a couple years. Still didn't have a problem getting mail. Since we've lived here, the 4 years we've lived here, we have had problems with mail almost weekly. Either we receive mail that belongs to someone else receives mail that belongs to us. I've had checks from vendors that never show up. I've had packages that never show up. Packages that have been left on the driveway behind where the car pulls out of the garage. Like we've literally run over a package because who the hell would think to check behind the car when pulling out of the garage? That's not where the packages go. And I've called, I've called the office, the post office. I've asked to speak with the supervisor of the delivery people 10 or 15 times in the past 4 years. I swear every single time I call, there is a new person in charge, which it could be part of the problem. Part of the problem might be there's so much inconsistency and such a high turnover in the management that it's impossible to make any lasting change, to affect any lasting change. But every time I call, I get the same sort of placating answers of, we'll look into it. We talked to the driver. Turns out that day there was a substitute driver and they didn't know what they were doing. But, a couple problems with that. Number one, they never actually ask me what day I'm talking about. And when I call, I'm usually talking about a series of events. It takes a while for me to get to the boiling point where I call. So I'm not talking about a specific thing. I'm talking about, hey, in the past month, all of these things happened. And so when they call me back and they say, we talked to the driver and there was a substitute driver that day, I basically know I'm being blown off because they have no idea what day that day even was. But I found out recently that this problem is much bigger than I thought. I thought it was just our driver or our block. But we started, my wife and I started using this Nextdoor website and app. And so like a whole bunch of people in the general area are all on this Nextdoor app. And, people post whatever, I'm selling a dresser, or I found a lost dog, or whatever. But the most active thread I've seen is the one complaining about U.S. Postal Service. Everybody has the same complaints. Everybody doesn't get mail. The other day, someone posted that mail just literally didn't come that day. And they called the post office and they said, hey, where's our mail? And the response they got was, hey, leave us alone. We're just really busy. We didn't get to it today. I'm like, okay, when did they throw out the neither rain nor sleet nor snow will stop the postman from getting to you thing? Because that was I thought that was the motto that they went by. Now it seems to be like, hey, we'll get to it if we get to it. Quit your bitching. And because I've noticed it before, and I've always kind of questioned it. And I'm like, did I just not get any mail today, or did they literally not deliver the mail today? And that happens fairly often. And like I said, I've had vendor checks not show up. The people who are complaining about all kinds of like packages that didn't show up, checks that didn't show up, birthday cards that have been opened before they arrive, and they don't know if there was supposed to be money in them or whatever. And so everyone pretty much has followed the protocol. You call the post office, you complain. You call the regional customer service of the U.S. Postal Service and complain. I've even gone as far as to contact the U.S. Postal Service Office of the Inspector General to complain. And none of those things gets anywhere. The regional customer service and the Office of the Inspector General both kind of shrug their shoulders and go, we don't know. It's not our jurisdiction, or, they probably just had a bad day. Nobody seems to want to deal with the problem. And so recently we've upped that game, and we meaning me and other people in the area have contacted the local newspaper. We've contacted local television stations, like investigative report type stuff, trying to see if we can get some public heat on the issue and try to get some resolution. We can't seem to even get the media to engage on the issue so far. So I'm not really sure what the next step is supposed to be. I'd contact my congressman, but I think he's pretty much a douchebag, and I don't really want to deal with him either. But anyway, like I said, I will post the survey results and share what people's kind of feedback was about who they choose for postal service, package delivery, and the issues that they've encountered. Like I said, especially with the holidays coming up, and with Amazon Prime used to be much better, but in the last couple of years, there's been a lot more of this UPS SurePost, or whatever they call it, where you order something and it's shipped UPS, but UPS gives it to the U.S. Postal Service. At which point, who knows? Just a few weeks ago, we ordered something. We had UPS tracking. The UPS tracking ended at the part where they said we gave it to the U.S. Postal Service. The U.S. Postal Service, for a week and a half, actually, it might still say it if I go look. The U.S. Postal Service just said, "Yeah, we have this package." There was never any we didn't scan it in, we didn't scan it out, we didn't deliver it. It's just gone. We actually called the vendor. They shipped us a replacement. The replacement and the lost one both arrived on the same day, but the post office tracking was never updated. The post office tracking still said this package was in limbo somewhere. So, so I have a feeling this is going to be a bigger issue in the next couple months with all the holiday shopping, most of which, at least in this household, we do through Amazon. We do it with Amazon Prime, and I think there needs to be more heat put on Amazon and on UPS about this relationship with the post office, because when I buy something from Amazon with Amazon Prime, I expect it in 2 days. That's the promise. When something is given to UPS to give to me in 2 days, I expect it in 2 days. That's the commitment. And it impacts the reputation of both Amazon and the UPS, and UPS, when they hand something over to the U.S. Postal Service and it just disappears, or it's late, or it's damaged, or whatever. So, in my opinion, it would be in their best interest for both Amazon and UPS not to engage in a relationship with the U.S. Postal Service, at least in this area. So that's that. Other tech news this week: Microsoft rolled out an update for the Outlook app for iOS and Android. And what was interesting about it is they came out with the Outlook for iOS app back in February, and I've used it as my default email client on my iPhone since then. So when they gave me early access to this new one, and all of the information I had, all of the news that was given to me said this was a big redesign. This was we've overhauled the app. And I got it and I installed it and I looked at it and I said, this looks exactly like the app I was already using. I can't even tell what you did. But after I had a chance to, I did a briefing with Javier Soltero, who's the corporate vice president in charge of all things Outlook for Microsoft. He walked me through how they've worked with the design teams from Accompli, which is an email client that Microsoft bought, and Sunrise, which is a calendar app client that Microsoft bought. And those teams have been merged into the Outlook team, and they leveraged their experience, their design insight, and tweaked things. And so it turns out there are actually a lot of subtle but fundamental tweaks to the way the app works and the way information is presented, and it does make it more efficient and it does make it more effective. And ultimately, I commend Microsoft and the team of developers for being able to make substantial changes in the kind of the look, not so much the look, but substantial changes in how information is presented and processed by me, the user, without fundamentally changing the whole app. Because a lot of times, Microsoft customers in particular get irate when Microsoft will move this button from here to here, or take a feature they're used to finding over here and move it over here. And so there's this whole thing about change for the sake of change, and why did Microsoft move all the buttons around? And so in this case, I feel like they did exactly the opposite, where they made significant changes without changing any of that stuff. So at first glance, it really looked exactly like the same app I've been using for 9 months already, but it is substantially different. So if you haven't ever used Outlook on iOS or Android, I suggest you take a look. If you've been using Outlook for iOS or Android, try out the new one. Let me know what you think. Comment here. Comment on the post on TechSpective. Let me know if you agree that that the changes are good, even though they're not obvious. And then, all right. So then, finally, I wanted to talk about the marketing campaign that's been started by the PC industry. So basically, like Intel, Microsoft, HP, Dell, and Lenovo, maybe some other players, all got together and said, hey, we're the PC industry. PC sales have been waning. We need to do something about that. And meanwhile, we have all these people, we have this whole customer base of people who bought their last computer a decade ago, when they bought their Windows XP computer in 2002, and they haven't upgraded their hardware since then. They're still using that same computer. So we need to have a marketing campaign to tell them what they're missing or why they should buy a new computer. Fair enough. I agree with the premise. That's kind of where my agreement ends, though. I think the execution is lacking, and I think that first of all, when I saw even just the name, when I got the press release before the campaign started, and it's called PC Does What? And I thought, that just, it sounds too cartoony. It sounds too cheesy. It doesn't even sound like you're serious. And then the commercials, if you've seen any of the ads, I mean, they've been playing them pretty heavy. But the scenarios are all kind of ridiculous. It's like, someone's using a computer while they get onto a helicopter to do a helicopter rescue of a guy who's stranded at sea on a raft with his laptop. or somebody's sitting poolside and the cabana boy brings them a laptop. And in all of these, there's always like a little text thing that pops up next to it that explains what aspect of the new computer is that they're trying to demonstrate. Whether it's how lightweight and portable they are now, which today's laptops are significantly lighter and more portable than something you'd get in 2002. They talk about how the screen is more edge to edge, without you don't have a 1-inch plastic bezel around the display. The screen goes all the way to the edges on a lot of the laptops today. They talk about the battery life, how it's not an hour and a half or 2 hours, it's 10 hours, 12 hours, 15 hours. Those are all good things. And I think that that's a good point to try to get across, but I don't think the point gets across because the marketing slogan is so cheesy, and because the scenarios in the ads themselves are so over the top. It all takes away from whatever the little text bubble is of the feature they're trying to sell, and ultimately I question the value at all, because I feel like the people who are using a computer from 2002 already know they're using a computer from 2002. I don't know anyone who doesn't realize that processing power is faster, hard drive storage is bigger, better, harder, faster, that displays are better, Wi-Fi is better, that everything about it is better. It's not like they didn't know that and they're going to see the commercial and they're going to go, oh, well, I didn't know that you've improved everything. I guess I'll go buy a new laptop. So I'm not sure. Like I said, I get where they're coming from. I understand and agree with the basic premise, but that's not how I would have gone about it. I don't know. I don't know that this is an effective campaign. So anyway, that is the almost internet famous weekly TechSpective happy hour for this week. And thanks for watching. I do want to give a quick shout out again, and I may not necessarily do this every single week. We'll see, but I want to give a shout out to the sponsors because they're the ones who keep TechSpective going, and we wouldn't have this video without that. So thanks to SpectreSoft, thanks to DevOps.com, thanks to Silence, thanks to WebRoot, thanks to Barracuda, and thanks to Adobe Security. We actually have a couple new sponsors coming on board in a couple days for in November. So I will reveal them next week. So again, thanks to the sponsors. Thank you for watching, and again, if you have an opportunity, try one of these Lazy Magnolia Southern Pecan Nut Brown Ale. Have a good weekend.